Hi, I'm Mike Sukikwaptu, and I'm talking here with Maureen Powers. Maureen Powers, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Maureen Powers, and I am a former professor of psychology and neuroscience at Vanderbilt University. I've been out here in California for about the past 20 years with the Gemstone Foundation, which I founded as a way to help children and others use their eyes to the best way they can. My background is in vision science. I'm a PhD from the University of Michigan, did postgraduate work at University of Washington in Seattle, and then went to Vanderbilt. I've been interested in my entire career in the development of the visual system. In the beginning, my work was with laboratory studies. I worked with animals, looking at the way their visual systems grew and developed, with the emphasis on cells in the retina. When I left the laboratory and wanted to continue work in vision science, I founded the Gemstone Foundation and started work with real children in schools. And so I think that's probably what we're going to be talking about today.
Definitely, and I think before we get too deep into understanding how it works in schools, could you describe a little bit of the difference between sight and vision? I understand they're two different things.
Yes, that's a very, very excellent point, because most children in school are tested for sight, for eyesight. That means the ability to basically see the eye chart, which is across the room, 20 feet away. They cover one eye and then they cover the other eye, and the examiner determines which line, the smallest line that they can read. This eyesight test is extremely valuable for figuring out what visual acuity is, the smallest thing you can see. Really important to be able to see relatively small things for reading. It's important for driving. It's important for just about anything in life. But it is tested one eye at a time and pays no attention whatsoever to how the eyes move. Now, when you get into vision as a whole, it's a much more integrative process than simply the eye chart. And most people think when they get the eye chart done at home or in the doctor's office or whatever, that they've had their vision tested, and they have, but they've only had that one small part of it tested. You know, we have color vision, we have the ability to feel where we are in space, we can move relative to space. Vision is 80% of our perceptual system, and you're only testing that one tiny piece. Important piece, but that's all you're testing. The other piece has to do, or the important piece, the equally important piece, which we look at, is called functional binocular vision, and that has to do with the ability of the two eyes to move together. Now, I have a demonstration which I'd like to show you later about what it might look like for kids. But if you can imagine that you have two eyes, and in order to see something clearly, you can close one eye, of course, and that's what you do when you see the eye chart. But if the two eyes are open, if they're not looking at exactly the same place, the brain is going to get two pictures. And you can demonstrate that to yourself by holding your thumb out in front of your face. Close one eye, close the other, the thumb moves around, the brain's getting two different pictures, somehow, magically, and we think we understand how now, but somehow, magically, the brain puts those two pictures together, so you're not aware that you're looking at two things, but you have two eyes, you have two arms, two eyes, and you have a lot of things. So when those two eyes are not coordinated, it can interfere with reading in the following way. If you're trying to get your two eyes to go across a text like this, this eye is moving outward and this eye is moving inward. If they're not doing so at the same rate and looking at the same word at the same time, what's going to happen? Well, this one could be a little behind that one, which means if the sentence is "the cat jumped," this one might be looking at this at the, while this one's looking at cat. So kids get confused, their words get mixed up, they actually skip lines, they lose tracking ability. It can be a very disruptive problem. So those are the two functional differences. There's the two components of that. Actually, there are more than two, but the primary ones are tracking, the ability to track the eyes, and the ability to track them together. And that's what we work on. That's as important as acuity for academic achievement, as we'll talk about later. Also, in my studies, we've found that the two are what we call orthogonal. You can have great eye chart vision and then have this binocular vision problem. They're independent. Or you can have really bad eye chart vision and have great binocular vision. I mean, they're not dependent on each other, they're uncorrelated.
Uncorrelated,
Which
right.
is another reason why it's important to test both of them.
Exactly. And then by and large, just looking at my own experience, I don't remember getting much screenings on the tracking or the movement, but just the acuity.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the researches you've done and the connections made with, I guess, juvenile delinquency in eyesight.
Yes, so this is important. Juvenile offenders often need eyeglasses, that's certainly true, but I've said they're independent. So when you look at, and there's a large proportion of them that don't want to wear them. Kids don't want to wear glasses either. This isn't too surprising. And when you're not achieving very well in academics, which a lot of juvenile offenders aren't, then they don't see a need to wear glasses. So there is this other issue, however, and it turns out if you test people in like overall, we've done community testing, we've done elementary schools, high schools, we've tested all kinds of people for this issue, and also for acuity, of course. And what we find is that if you look at a community as a whole, for pre-presbyopic people who don't have to hold their arms out like this yet, don't have bifocals yet, if you look at those people, what you find is that they're about 30% have one or more of these issues. So the incidence of something like convergence insufficiency by itself, the inability to coordinate the two eyes this way, is probably around 12%. But then you add on top of that tracking problems, and you add on top of that the ability to focus rapidly, and you find out that there's about 30% of the population as a whole that has this 25-30. That's interestingly about the same proportion that needs glasses.
Wow.
It's not it isn't the same proportion because, as I said, they're orthogonal, but not an additional 30% that's basically non-overlapping. Okay, so now we've got that basic statistic. Now you go to juvenile offenders. These are basically, we looked at teenagers in camps in Orange County and Los Angeles County. They were primarily males. There were some females in the Orange County facility. We also did some day facilities, which were for juveniles who were not incarcerated. What we find there is that percent of kids who, of these offenders, who have this binocular convergence constellation of things, functional binocular vision problems, is over 60%.
Wow.
So it's like 60 to 65%, which means that even when they try to read, it's difficult.
Right.
So, because, again, they would skip lines, get confused, get frustrated, and stop.
Yeah. Wow. So tell us a little more about some of the work that Gemstone's doing more recently.
Yeah, the Gemstone Foundation has had some federal grants and other grants in order to look systematically at what effect training these skills can have on academic performance, on vision and on academic performance, two different issues, because not everyone who improves their vision improves academically, right? And so what we did was our study, the one larger one, we've been in schools in California, Wisconsin, Florida, multiple states, and also Japan. And the findings that I'm going to talk about really hold everywhere. But the specific study that I'll emphasize right now is the one that was done in Los Angeles Unified School District with 4 elementary schools. One was 5 elementary schools. One was particularly disadvantaged. It was in an African American area, very low, 100% free and reduced lunch for the kids, and so it was a little bit different from the others. So what we found was that, first of all, the overall percentage of children who have this problem ranges from about 35% to about 55%, again depending upon the socioeconomic status of the school. So the incidence really does change. And by the way we did this in the study was we actually did measurements of the ability to converge using a prism bar, for those who know about the optometric measurements that you do. We used an accommodative rule to measure accommodation. We used a pair of what's called flippers. I have an example of them. to measure your ability to focus back and forth, like from the board to the book, back and forth, with time, and a variety of different things. We measured about 50 different variables on these children. We also gave them a 15-item symptom survey checklist, which is something that tells us, correlates very well with the actual measurements that we took, especially certain ones of them, and it tells us whether the children are feeling, how they're feeling when they're reading. Like, do your eyes hurt when you read? Are you aware that your eyes are moving around? Are you aware that you're skipping lines, and so on and so forth? So we did all of those things with about, just 300,000 kids, lots of kids. And then we selected groups of them to participate in a series of in-class interventions. The intervention was a red and blue anaglyph program, which appeared on the computer. I have some illustrations of this that we could use perhaps later too. Cool. We can see the kids, since we can't go into the classroom in the era of COVID. There are no classrooms, so we can't even go. But we do have pictures. So the children wear red and blue glasses. There are red or blue images on the screen, and or blue. And their job is to respond with the computer keyboard to where images are on the screen or what their orientation is in order to get points in a video game. So when they do that, we ask them to work on this program. It's about 20 minutes a day for about 30 sessions, and they do it in the classroom at school. A computer lab is a typical location. Sometimes the computer tech watches them, sometimes we do. Doesn't make any difference who is actually supervising the program because they're on their own. Yeah. They get points. They compete with themselves. They love competing with their neighbor.
Oh yeah, kids love it.
So the way it works is that the red images come through the right eye, and the blue images come through the left eye. And to get points in some of the games, you have to use the eyes separately for tracking. For some of the games, you have to use the eyes together, and you cannot get points unless the eyes are working together. So what we find is that performance gradually improves in these games. So back up a little bit. We selected children to participate in this based on the measurements that we did. And we selected those that were having problems with their binocular skills to begin with. So we don't have very much of a control group. We're limited. The school really didn't want us to work with the kids that didn't have problems. They wanted us to work with the kids that did have problems. So
they wanted to focus on them.
Exactly. And we can talk about issues of doing experiments in schools forever also.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that's a scientific problem. But what we found was that when we give these children this intervention, and they do it for 30 days, a minimum of 20 days is where we saw the effect, then you see not only do at least 80% of them improve their vision measurements, because we do the same measurements afterwards, but they also improve their reading. About 50% of them improve reading as measured by the school.
Oh, that's cool.
We do our own measurements, and of course they improve. But okay, we're the experimenters. But the school's measures also improve. Now, by the way, this happened in the juvenile offenders also. Our difficulty there was in when we did the study was in finding kids that were motivated, because juvenile offenders don't necessarily want to read better. So
it's a different perspective.
It's a different perspective. All of them, basically, it's safe to say all of them read poorly, read below grade level. But those who want to achieve are fewer. So we had maybe 10 or 15 in one camp and about the same in the other camp. But they did improve. So that's what happens. So the bottom line is, if you find children that are reading below grade level, that are symptomatic and have signs of binocular vision problems, and you give them binocular vision training, they improve.
That's incredible. Learning about the program and the interventions in the schools that you worked with, I'm beginning to wonder, how would anyone outside these areas access that kind of intervention? What would somebody in another school elsewhere do get access to that kind of stuff?
That's a very interesting question too. Well, first of all, they have to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I'm sure other people in your video library have talked about, there has been resistance both from the reading world, the education world, and from the vision world to this approach.
Yes.
So the first issue is kind of public relations issue. People do not know, and perhaps even if they hear about it, they distrust this methodology. But set that aside for a minute. If you wanted it and you were not in an area in a school that had it, the Gemstone Foundation offers individual, it's an internet program, so it's distance learning. You can use that term now. So you call us up or go to our website, send us an email, and you can send me an email personally, and we will discuss with you how you can get it yourself. And what we do with individual clients is we work with you on the phone to make sure you get it set up on your computer. We send you the equipment that's required. It's just a pair of red and blue glasses. And then we monitor your progress throughout and give you and we make sure that you go see a doctor beforehand.
For sure.
So to make sure that there's no, factor involved that would mitigate against this program.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Now what I'd like to talk about is getting to understand a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there were some bills you were pushing through?
Yes.
Could you tell us about those?
Sure. A few years ago, we had a champion in the in the California Senate, and unfortunately, he was derailed at the end of our process by a felony conviction. Basically, he was living outside the district where he had been elected. But we got a long distance before that happened in the California legislature. We have not pursued it again, although there are some thoughts that we might try it again. The goal was to get the state of California to support both a screening procedure and an intervention procedure as a pilot program. So the screening procedure would have been to screen all kids to be able to make sure that to see, in addition to all of the other issues that we test for in California, which is basically acuity and color vision, to also test for this functional binocular vision issue.
Functional binocular vision.
Functional binocular vision. And there was a so that those bills did not they got into committee, and they were well along in committee, but they never came to the assembly floor for a vote. Another bill did actually pass that was watered down, that did have a provision for some kind of functional vision test. That did pass the legislature ultimately a few years ago. Was offered by a different, after our bills failed. This was kind of a makeshift thing that would go through. And it did have a provision for a functional test. But as far as I can tell, I've been talking with the state. There's been no implementation of that bill. So.
Right, and there's a lot of no implementation of that third thing you're talking about.
Yes.
We're from Washington State. Now we went to Illinois. Everybody's keen on acuity and color is coming up, but not the functional vision.
Yes, right. So, and that's extremely important, as we've just talked about. And, I don't know how to get over this public relations issue. It's extremely difficult. But what you're doing right now with these, getting this video library and so on, that's going to go a long way toward helping. We have a lot of powerful and very interesting and interested people on our side now, and I believe the doctors are coming around. Just talked to a major internet reading intervention company the other day, and they're aware that things are changing with regard to the attitude toward vision problems with kids and reading. So.
And you said attitude towards vision problems or vision difficulties. You, as somebody who specializes in psychological work, I think that gets left out. When I think of the school psychologists back home, they're concerned with chemical dependency, imbalances, all that kind of things, but vision isn't on there.
That's correct. It's
Yeah.
not. And although I'm an experimental psychologist,
Yeah.
I point out, I
Yeah.
always say I don't understand people, and that's really true.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
neuroscientist, but it's true. That's not
Yeah.
on the list.
Right.
There are a few school psychologists around who know us and know about us and,
Mhm.
and realize that that can be an issue, especially if a kid is continuing to struggle with reading.
Mhm.
Then vision is something that needs to be looked at, not just by
Right.
I don't mean to denigrate any particular profession, but pediatricians tend to just do the eye chart. Some ophthalmologists do not look at functional binocular vision, and honestly, some optometrists do not either.
Mhm.
So one needs to find a doctor who is in tune with educational issues.
Right.
You can go to the COVD, College of Optometrists and Vision Development website, and that lists doctors according to zip code who will pay attention to this issue. So I think that's one way around it. Yeah.
Definitely. If there's anything else you'd like to share while we're sitting, that'd be great. But I'm more interested in learning about those demonstrations you had.
Great. Okay, let me share one more thing.
Yeah.
And that is that I was reminded because I talked with this reading company.
Mhm.
We used an excellent reading company, Reading Plus,
Mhm.
which was started by Stan Taylor years ago. Stan Taylor was the scientist who, at the Stanford Research Institute, built the first eye tracker ever, and that was back probably in the 60s or 70s or something like that. Anyway, I remember being just astonished in graduate school when we were actually able to measure eye movements, complex saccadic eye movements in humans as part of human experimentation. It was very exciting development. Well, he went along for some years. His son grew up, Mark, and the two of them formed together Reading Plus. Reading Plus was based on the idea that eye movements are an important part of reading. And some of you may be familiar with an instrument called the Visograph. The Visograph is an eye tracker for doctors and reading specialists and classroom use, where it actually does measure kids' eye movements while they're reading, and they're reading standardized, metricized material, so you can tell exactly where their eyes are, their reading rate, how many return readings they do, their reading efficiency, basically. This was a big part of the Reading Plus program.
Mhm.
They also had, of course, interventions where you read paragraphs and ask questions for comprehension. They measure fluency online, all of those kinds of things. And they had a little tracking training program, too. Well, recently, they have decided to discontinue the Visograph.
Mm.
They're not going to build it anymore. So I asked their company, the new CEO, if this meant that they were going to de-emphasize eye movements.
Okay.
And they are for now,
Okay.
but they are thinking about bringing it back
Mhm.
because of the change in attitude that their scientists recognize. So what we did is we took the Reading Plus program,
Mhm.
not the Visograph, the reading program itself, from a company that understands eye movements and actually has some tracking training with both eyes together.
Right.
And we compared the results on reading proficiency of having kids sit side by side and do our vision training program, no reading training, and their reading training program, no binocular vision training. And we asked, these were reading disadvantaged kids, all of them with convergence problems. We asked what was the effect on reading behavior.
Mhm.
And we found that the Reading Plus kids did not improve very much at all, and the kids in the Gemstone program improved pretty dramatically.
Right.
So what that means to me is that there's a hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
You need to get the physicality of reading out of the way first, and then you can do the reading. If you're working so hard to just get your muscles in the right place, how can you concentrate on the content of the words?
Right,
You
right,
just
right.
can't. If the brain, garbage in, garbage out.
Right, and that's that connection we talked earlier, doubling back, sight and vision. Sight is just the physical part, the vision is the comprehension, the understanding part.
Right.
Excellent. Cool. Well, I'm curious, and the reason why the perspective that I'm bringing to this is the layperson. I'm coming in as a parent. My son had a convergence insufficiency, binocular instabilities, and when I first heard about them, I didn't understand a thing about it, and I was even skeptical myself. But it wasn't until I went through the therapies and seen the improvements for myself, and then I was able to see that impact in his school performance, starting, fortunately for us, in preschool. we'd be mentioned a harder position if it was much later. So we want to come up with these visual materials for parents to understand and get over those anxieties and distrusts when it comes to the what it is that we're told from school boards, school nurses. Because when it comes down to it, it kind of feels like we've done something wrong as a parent. Oh, we missed an appointment, or we didn't get this thing checked. And getting over those kind of things and just moving forward for the benefit of the student, benefit of our kids is what we want to do. And learning to understand what our kids are struggling to articulate. They can't articulate. The words are moving, and when they do, we don't understand because we don't have that same difficulty.
That's exactly right. It's very perceptive.
Could you tell us a little bit how everything we're learning about vision, access to intervention, the training that's available, and how that relates to social justice?
Absolutely. This is, to me, a major social justice issue. As I pointed out, there tends to be a higher proportion of kids with this kind of problem in disadvantaged communities. And in juvenile offenders who often come from disadvantaged communities. I think that part of this has to do with care that's available to them, but I honestly don't think that's the genesis of it. I think the genesis is that people are not aware of this problem. So let's back up. The fact that we're not aware of it as a society impacts more those people who are disadvantaged than it does other people, and that's just not fair.
Yeah.
Because it gives them a disadvantage throughout life. I can't tell you how many people who, as adults, now recognize that they had this kind of problem when they were children, and it was determinant of what career path they chose, or whether they didn't choose a career path. One of my closest friends, for example, was probably slightly dyslexic, but we know now has a convergence insufficiency problem. He gravitates, very, very smart, gravitated toward woodshop, wound up being a contractor and a firefighter, and now and really had not, and he had problems. He was going up the ranks in firefighting, but suddenly you had to take tests. And written tests. This was years ago, but you had to take written tests, and he couldn't finish them.
Right.
And so it stalled his career. That's just not fair. It's not fair. And I think that our tendency now this is maybe going a little far afield, but we just promote kids along. Okay, he can't read, but he's good in math. Okay, he can't read, but he's good in shop, whatever it is.
Right.
I really don't understand the education system very well that way, but there is a tendency to move kids along, and I think that is simply not fair, and it tends to happen again to those kids who are not in the socially advanced classes.
Well, you say socially advanced classes. I'm going to go off on a tangent, if we will, it seems like educational systems, whether that's American or otherwise, lean on these written tests as a measuring that advances. Whereas, like, if you're not equipped with these visual abilities, it's going to hold you back.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question in my mind that when you can't finish a test, because it's some of them are designed to be too long, so you can't finish them, right? I mean, but tests that are designed to be finished in a certain period of time, it puts you at a major disadvantage, and you see kids crimp along with their hands are over like this, or trying to write, trying to read at the same time. And again, if you're struggling to get your eyes in the right place, you're not going to be able to concentrate as much on the questions themselves. And yeah, they do tend to produce reading tests. That is another issue.
Yeah.
There are plenty of other abilities that people have, but there is a basic ability to read that needs to be there, where people are not afraid of it. And that, to me, is a right. I mean, you don't have to be an expert reader, but you do have to be able to read and decipher things without it hurting. And that, to me, is the same as you need to have a pair of glasses. There's no distinction. If you choose not to wear the glasses, fine, but it needs to be available to you. So and it's not now.
Cool. And where do you see all these issues, these interventions, these moves happening in the future?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to recognize that binocular vision, like everything else, is on a spectrum. that there are people who are extreme, strabismics, amblyopes, people who are anisotropic. I can use all those fancy words, but there's a category of people who need medical doctor intervention of one sort or another, best to be determined by medical and optometric physicians. Then there's the other extreme of those people who are born natural binocular readers. They don't need any help at all. They're going to be fine. You put a book in front of them when they're, in third grade, and they will not have this problem. You can call them natural born readers, like we have natural born athletes, but think about it, primates are not natural born readers, right? Primates have to learn to, they're predators. They see out there, not predators, they're predators. They see out there and they eat fruits and they see things at a distance. About the only thing they do close by is pick nits from their kid's head and stuff. Right. So you need to learn to move your eyes properly, just like you need to learn to hold a bat and all the basic skills of the reading game. So where I see it going in the future is, first of all, I think we have to consider right now the immediate future with the pandemic. Doctors that, so let me finish the continuum. So there's the people who need to see a doctor, the people who don't need any intervention, and then there are people in the middle, and those are the ones that primarily Gemstone deals with. We want to catch those kids who maybe been to the pediatrician, maybe have been told they have a tracking problem or something, but it's not severe enough to warrant something like vision therapy, or it's not severe enough to warrant surgery or patching or anything like that. They have a weakness. So what we do is analogous to physical therapy, right? As opposed to some medical intervention. So it's the middle of the spectrum that we're really dealing with. Where do I see it going in the future? Let's go back to the COVID-19 problem. You can't go to the doctor's office as easily as you could before. Doing one-on-one physical therapy, vision therapy is going to be difficult. However, there are distance measures that are available. Ours is one of them. They can still be supervised by a doctor. And I would recommend that if you're having these kinds of issues, that's where you start, is the doctor's office. There's a whole issue, by the way, of a journal called Vision Development and Rehabilitation. Last month's issue, I think, devoted to distance mechanisms for things like vision therapy. It's worth looking at. It's online. Cool. So where are we going? So you have to be cautious about that, and I'm hoping doctors will be more amenable to sending their patients to interventions like this as a first step, for something to see what, if it doesn't work, then we go back and try something that requires more serious one-on-one work. So that's the immediate need. But don't hesitate to call. We can't just sit here and wait out the pandemic. Your kid's education depends on it. Yeah. Secondly, I think that the world is loosening up. There's less tension about this issue in recent years. There are younger doctors that are coming up that are less vehemently opposed to the vision therapy approach. There's a behavioristic tendency that's going on in medicine that optometry, part of optometry, has always had, but it's more, physicians are coming to understand that you need to deal with the whole patient, and I think that's helping our cause. There are more and more papers coming out showing the relationship between vision problems and academics, and specifically these muscular issues in academics. In this country and other countries. So there's data and there's attitude. The slowest to come along is the education world. As you mentioned before, it's so, the expertise is so dispersed and so diverse and so, and at the same time so strident about what they believe and what they don't believe, that it's difficult to change. It's like trying to change a marshmallow. You make a little dent here, but it has no effect over here. So that's going to be a more difficult nut to crack. And I'm doing some other work, which I can't really talk about here, but it has to do with technological advances that will, I hope, help that out. But we need to continue the legislative efforts once we can do those again. And we need to continue the social justice efforts, and we need to somehow get this out there. I've been in this business for about 20 years, And as far as I can tell, about the same proportion of people know about it as did before. So
Right.
something needs to be cracked. And there's a hockey stick model
Yeah.
of business advancement. And I'm just hoping we're getting close to that little crook there.
Right, right, right.
There are Facebook pages, there are, Facebook groups and
Mhm.
things that are involved in this. I mean, the more people who know about it, the better off we are.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. And that's something we hope to do with our video series, our video libraries for parents, for people who are identifying some of these difficulties they have in themselves. We're hoping to share all that information with everybody.
Great, great.
Thank you,
Good
Maureen.
job.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you.